Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and you're listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. I say it all the time. I'll continue to say it. I appreciate you for listening in. And because you've been such faithful listeners, you helped us get ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So thank you for doing that. And continue to help us out. Rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. I know we hear that all the time, but it really does help and it matters to us. So if there's something in particular that you like, share that in a review. It'll help others to be encouraged and inspired by the podcast. Okay. All right. Now, today I'm talking with Sheila Buswell. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Sheila. She is the CEO and co founder of Buswell Biomedical, and she's a veteran of the U.S. Army and author of the book, Is This Seat for Me? Overcoming Imposter Syndrome in Everyday Life and Business. Her book shares stories of a diverse group of accomplished individuals who struggled with self doubt and found ways to overcome it. Sheila developed a concept for the upward mobility to improve the quality of life for people at rehabilitation centers. And she promotes physical mobility through technology. I'm so excited. Can't wait to hear more about this. Welcome, Sheila Buswell.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. All right. So now you heard me kind of give your official introduction, but why don't you start off by telling us whatever you like to tell us about so people get a sense of you before we get into the longer story, a sense of who you are and what you do.
I don't know that my story is going to encapsulate all of me, but we'll try.
Well, give us a snapshot for what we could do today.
So when I joined the military because I had a departmental scholarship that was tied to a high GPA, and I lost that scholarship. So I was like, wanted to pay for school, so I joined the Army. I ended up getting injured, and I was in a rehab hospital, but it was a UN rehab hospital. I had tons of people at my service to take care of me, all the healthcare workers in the world. And then I get a medical discharge after I was injured. I get a medical discharge. I get a complete my education at that time. And I ended up with a MS in engineering, and I worked for a lot of great companies. But 20 years after my injury, my mom falls in Arizona, and she's in a rehab hospital in Arizona where she didn't have the dedicated staff. Like my issue was I just didn't like to have an entourage with me for everything I did. But I was in the military and I thought, oh, that's life then. I signed up for this. My mom definitely did not. And my mom, she's a woman who got married in the 50s. So she doesn't have the same, like I was like, okay, I didn't care if it was a man or if it was all women for me, but I wouldn't care, right? I didn't have the same. But my mom she had to wait for hours for somebody to help her and for any of the activities of daily living, but specifically toileting, right? You have to have somebody with you at all times. And a lot of healthcare workers are male, which good, but it leads a task like when you go to the airport and you have to lift your luggage is limited to 50 pounds. Well, a person doesn't weigh 50 pounds. Even my tiny little mama weighs 100 pounds. So that's two healthcare workers. And there's a lot of accidents that fall because people don't want to wait and they just take themselves. So that's like $180 billion every year of lawsuits filed. And I was in a situation where for the majority could empathize with my mom, and I was frustrated because it had been 20 years and no changes, but also I had worked as an engineer. I have a mechanical engineering degree and a biomedical engineering degree, and for the most amount of my time I did R&D and automation, like all of it. So although I my first impulse when I went to visit my mom in that rehab hospital was to burn it down, right? Like but it was like, no, those people are well intentioned. There's just not enough of them, and there's not equipment, and they don't have the right tool for the job or whatever. And so at the time, and I think a lot, you talk about finding a reason for living or like purpose. And I didn't, Like I was just going to keep my head down and finish my engineering degree out and work there. So my plan was to just go work for who was ever developing a product like the upward mobility. Well, what I learned was that there was nobody developing a product like the upward mobility. They solved the problem in other ways. Like instead of a fall, they would call it an unplanned descent to the floor or to the chair or whatever, with or without injury. And they weren't solving or attacking the problem, they were just masking it or calling it something else. So that initial desire to just solve this problem and go work for whoever was solving this problem became my issue, right? Like I ended up getting a patent and starting a business and doing this whole thing to develop a product, which a lot of people in the entrepreneurial space are serial entrepreneurs. I did not have that in my plan for myself, but I do realize now that the purpose that I'm given every day, doing what I do, is meaningful, right? I can provide more dignity through the work that I do than, I'm helping a lot of people. Whereas before, I worked for great companies doing great things, but I personally didn't feel fulfilled. And the money was nice. It was nice to have a vacation, paid vacation. It was nice to have a 401k, but it's much more palatable to live every day knowing that you're doing something that matters.
Yes, yes. I mean, it does sound like really important work. So tell for people who, might be new to this understanding of mobility, what is the upward mobility?
The upward mobility is a combination of it's a mechanical, like gantry type system that fits through a hospital door and around a toilet. And it's got artificial intelligence, machine learning, and sensors that control the device so that a, like any patient would have a personalized situation where they would know, the device would know their movement and what's normal for them and society as a whole, or whoever else has got this machine learning algorithm. So in real time, motion is analyzed and compared with your previous motion and all the other people's who are in this library. And it allows people to conduct the activities of daily living like toileting completely safe, but independently. Like, so instead of calling a healthcare worker, you would call this device and it would come to you in a similar way to a Roomba. You would connect your personal harness that knows your motion and put it on like a jacket and then go do your activities of daily living. And the thing would know by a technology called radio frequency identification that this person is in the upward mobility and this is where it's located, and it has a speaker if you need more help. If something happens and you need help, a healthcare worker knows your location and where to send the help that you need. So,
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So it lifts them and helps them move in ways
well,
that
they
they weren't
move
able to.
under their own power, but it does lift them. If they need help, like a toddler, right? Like when they're learning how to walk, they stumble, you just pick
Mm-hmm.
them up. I don't have any kids, but I have nieces and nephews. I know that well. And it would do that. It would allow, like if somebody stumbles, they wouldn't be hanging there like a piñata. They would just be off-weighted enough where they could get their feet under them.
That's amazing, Sheila. That's absolutely amazing. And you developed this? This idea
Yes.
came to you from out of your mother's experience and your experience, and you created a solution out of a problem that you saw firsthand. I think that's absolutely incredible.
Thank you for saying that. When I wrote the book, Is the Seat for Me? It was all about imposter syndrome, right? Because when I was pitching the business to try and get money or like and educate myself in business and in machine learning and artificial intelligence in every possible way. But when I asked questions, I was pathologized with imposter syndrome, and I didn't know what that meant. I had never heard that term before, and so I that's where the book came from. The more I talked about this symptom, a lot of people have it, if not everybody. And it was just kind of interesting to say, okay, yeah, I don't have it about machine learning or about business acumen, but I do have it in other areas of my life, and I wouldn't have identified that previously.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I know for you it's like you've done this a while ago, but I'm very struck by this and how it could help so many people, especially in ways that they could not have been helped before. Absolutely amazing. All right. So which came first, the upward mobility or the book?
The upward mobility. Like I had this patent, or I'd filed for the patent and I was taking business classes, business accelerators, things like that. And I started asking questions, and that's when I learned about imposter syndrome. And then that's when I started talking. I've been doing the upward mobility. My mom fell in 2018. Since then, but the book I think was published in 2023. So I it still took a couple years to write, and then I ended up rewriting it again when I found out, oh, this is a problem a lot of people have, but just not talked about.
Yes.
So it all took a lot of time, but I again, the purpose, right? I thought, oh, as I talk about in the book, this is an issue that I have. But it's like if you don't look like what society expects, that can hinder their impression of you. And I think the society's impression of you can make yourself question whether you belong where you are. And I didn't have that question about like, yeah, I had no doubt I could learn business or anything I needed to learn about machine learning, artificial intelligence. But it freaks me out if I'm in a room full of women or I have to get a mask. Like I just learned what an eyelash curler was. And that's my, I don't, that my monster, my troll, and that speaks to me, or goblin. It's like, oh, whispers in my ear.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're let's see if I have this clear. You're making the point that we have some things that we don't like we can be really confident and sure of. And other areas or things in our life where we're like, I don't know, I'm not, is this, am I good enough in this particular area? And
Yes.
everybody has at least one area. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So you said you had yours with the, you know, you use the curling lashes example. Were you able to overcome it, or do you just like what do you teach in the book to help people overcome it, sit with it, or what's the solution to the problem?
So in the book, I give 5 personal solutions and 2 cultural solutions. But my first and my heaviest hitter is just remember your past experiences. And this ties into I didn't have any past experiences with an eyelash curler, but I'm like, I figured out a concrete countertop and how to make it. So I can figure this out. So I did it like everybody. It just gave me the confidence to move on. Yeah, okay, I don't know what this is. I mean, I don't know if you have this, Robin, if you have this same in your inner talk, but I don't like to not be an expert. I didn't want to go up to a makeup counter and be like, what is, you know what I mean? Because I just makes me feel some kind of way
Yeah.
to acknowledge that I don't know everything, even though I know that I don't know everything. But
Yeah.
if you have imposter syndrome, like I do, it's like I didn't even want to ask questions. I just wanted to pretend I knew it all. And which is different. Like if I had a machine learning question or a business question, I had no problem asking it. But all of a sudden, I don't know what color makeup do I wear? What color mascara, eyelash curler? What is this thing? I wouldn't ask that question.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think it's common in my experience because here at the podcast and in general in my life and world, I work with, talk to what I call high achieving women and men, all high achievers basically. And what I notice, I particularly pay attention to women because this is the podcast. Um, High achievers, we have a tendency of knowing lots of things and being good at some things. So it's a challenge when we don't know something, or like in your case, you don't want to ask for help because we're used to knowing it. And in my experience with talking with so many women over the 4 years of the podcast so far, a lot of it stems from being young, getting good grades, getting the star, getting the A's. And so when there's something that's off from that, because we were celebrated for doing that. And so if you don't have that moment of, I know this is a thing that I'll get an A in or get the star for, so to speak, then it's just not, we don't have the experience, the training to even manage what that's like. So this is a pattern I see across the women I've talked to over the last 4 years.
I don't know. It comes up in different areas of my life. Like a video game, I'm not I'm not on level one anymore like I was in my 20s. I'm progressed. So just recently, a book had come out. I had done all the stuff, considered an expert in imposter syndrome. I was pitching my business, and part of my business story is my deployment and my time in the military. And I got a medical discharge, right? A generator, but a generator fell on my foot. I didn't serve in Iraq. I didn't go to Afghanistan. So it was like I had imposter syndrome about that, and it manifested in a weird way. Like my I would record myself on the TV and my hand would fly up. Or I would just speak fast, even though I would concentrate on slowing down. And I think, uh, and that's one of my five things too, is when you compare your service to somebody else's or you compare yourself, I mean, it's ridiculous because you don't know the other person's path. They don't know how, you don't know how they got there. But nobody, I would never want somebody to be more injured. The idea is ridiculous. I don't want some to go to war. I don't want to send people to war. I don't want to, have that. But I was worried about that, like comparing, it's legitimate what happened to me, but it's not the most, thank goodness, it wasn't the worst possible thing that could happen to me.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I love both of those, and let me go back to the last one because I wanted to highlight what you said about your past experience. Like that does give you confidence. If you know you've done all these other things and you can do well, like in your case, you said you can do all these mechanical things, certainly you can figure this out or be taught this one, this makeup thing. And so I think that's a nugget. I wanted to highlight that for people who are listening because that's something they can do right now. Like if they're struggling with something, they could remember the past success or the past success that they have, all the other things they're able to do. And somehow, before they were able to do those things, they didn't know. Let's take driving, for example. Those of us who drive, there was a point where we didn't know how to drive. And there was a point where we weren't that good at it. I'm laughing because I'm imagining myself at 16-year old. You should, oh, it was an event watching me drive. Anyway,
It's funny how you say that because I say the same thing. On ramp to the, I felt like I was going so fast and I was going 45. And
yeah,
now I'm like the person who would be lose my patience, somebody going 45 on an on ramp. It's an acceleration lane. Go ahead,
we
sorry.
don't even think about it, right? Driving, we don't even notice that we're making the movements or doing the things. It's just unconscious. So y- you and I are on the same wavelength in terms of helping person think about something you've done before. You figured it out, you learned, you became good at it. So I think that's a good bit of wisdom for people to take away. And speaking of wisdom, all right. So now we mentioned, well, before we give them wisdom, let me hear more about, do you feel like your life or work has meaning and purpose now?
Yes.
And
Yes, I do.
what do you think attributes to it?
I think I spend a lot of, I know it's because I spend my time and my talent and all my energy in achieving a goal that I totally think is worthwhile and will help a lot of people.
Um, Now that brings me back to that moment that you kind of glossed over, but I think is very significant. Do you remember when you decided you were going to try to develop upward mobility, even if you didn't have the name? Was there a moment when you said, I'm going to do something about this?
I think it was a small evolution. It wasn't like I had an aha moment. At first, I was like figuring out how to solve a problem. I saw my mom struggling because she was waiting sometimes hours, not because my mom's huge, but because they're short-staffed. And they're even more short, they were short-staffed in 2018. In 2025, after several years of pandemic, they're even more short-staffed. So the longer wait times. And it frustrated me because I knew there was a better way. So in my mind, I was solving this problem, but I thought other people would have solved the problem. And I would just go work for who's ever doing this. And I was thinking in my mind that was probably like I've worked biomedical. That's my advanced degree is biomedical engineering, right? So I thought, oh, I'll have no problem. I worked for Harley Davidson. I worked for Anheuser-Busch. I worked for Bausch and Lomb. Like I didn't think I would have an issue going to work for whoever. But it never occurred to me that nobody was developing or trying to solve such a problem? It's better to just not acknowledge that that problem's going on. And that didn't make sense to me. So it wasn't like I had this idea, but I was like, there was a point in that continuum, I think it was about a year, where I was like, if not, it's not being worked on. It hasn't been worked on in the last 20 years. If not me, then who? If not now, then when? And I do think that was a pep talk that I gave myself. I've heard this so many times that a ship is perfectly safe in the harbor, but that's not what a ship is built for. And I thought, I was prepared in so many ways for exactly this situation. Just need to tackle it. I need to step through that open door. And that's a hard thing to do, right? Like following your own intuition and being like, I've taught engineering, I've taught biomedical physics. I need to actually do it. And
Mm.
it wasn't a moment where I was like, I'll do this. That wasn't something 10 years ago that I thought I would do, but it's definitely something I'm glad I did.
Glad you did too. And I'm glad you're sharing your story right now. I feel like it's inspiring somebody in this exact moment.
Mhm.
I feel that to be true. Okay, speaking of inspiring someone, all right, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but let me say a little more. The podcast is to inspire women. I mentioned high achievers. So let me describe my definition of a high achiever. A woman who is ambitious in a positive way, responsible, sort of the responsible one all around. People come to her in her professional life. Oh, let me get your advice on this, or let me, hear what you have to say about this. In her personal life, whether it's the family, community, neighbor, they ask her for advice, whether it's anything she knows about or not. They just kind of come to her. She's that person, or she's any one of these things, the characteristics that I'm naming to you. And she's good at a few things, and she's okay with people coming to her. She's that person. But I thought, well, if she's that person, maybe the podcast could be a place where achievers come together and kind of support each other while we're supporting everyone else in that way. Then, as time went on, I realized she's also looking for more meaning and purpose in her work. She has the success, and now there's something missing. So that's who we're talking to right now. So from any area of your life and or work, what's one thing you could say to encourage her or inspire her or advice you want to give to her?
I think so often, women especially, they look for other people's advice. And I think following your own intuition more often, I'm not saying disregard all advice you're given because that's silly, but listen to yourself more. And you know what doors to walk through. Your inside your gut or whatever knows. But, you know, when I left Anheuser-Busch, everyone thought that was insane. I live in St. Louis. That's the place to work. People work there for 30 years. But then I left there because it just wasn't growing. There was nothing else to teach me. And it's not like I was motivated in a certain way. I took a huge pay cut. But 6 months later, they went from 400 corporate engineers to 12. So there was a lot of just the market here was flooded because St. Louis isn't a huge city. But I already had a job. I was already doing the things. And it's not like I knew to listen to those people. It's not like I was married at that time and I didn't have a safety net, but I was like, I just feel that's the right thing to do. And I think I was told that multiple times by powerful women that, you just got to follow what you think is right. But that's not something I think most people, most women, especially if your parents are working class, you know, quitting a good job is not something, to move to a lesser impressive job, not one that makes sense. But maybe that's what we need to tell people because ultimately it happened to me. I wasn't fulfilled with what I was doing, even though I was making tons of money. I was motivated by that, but it was very superficial. And now I don't make money, but I feel motivated every day to work.
I love that. I love that. And I'll say the people who are listening, I'm guessing that's very helpful what you just said. And it's not the only thing to your point. You could have both. You don't have to have either or. You could have both. There's lots of ways of doing this. But I think your story is absolutely amazing. I think what you've developed is a gift to the world, and that you're sharing the story is an additional gift upon the gift. And I feel fortunate that we had this opportunity today to talk about it and hear your story. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Robin, for saying that, because I feel this is a great conversation and your work is so important too, as well, as you know.
So if people want to hear from you, how can they reach you? What's your website?
So the book is called Is This Seat for Me? I have the website that goes with that, www.isthisseatforme.com. And if you go to that web address, you can get a free chapter of the audiobook or ebook, whatever your flavor is. My sister calls it the dead tree option. That's not available, obviously, but every other option is. And then we'll start an email conversation. I won't spam you, but we can talk then. That's the best way.
Okay, is this seat for me? Wonderful. Sheila, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day and sharing your wisdom here with us today. I've been inspired by it. Appreciate you.
Thanks.
Okay, everyone, I'd love to hear from you and just your response to the podcast episode today. Anything that really stuck out for you today? Any questions that you have? Head on over to the podcast website, leadershippurposepodcast.com, leadershippurposepodcast.com, and let me know what you think. Or if you rather just go on social media, follow me on any of the channels, but I spend most of my time on LinkedIn at Robin L. Owens, PhD, at Robin L. Owens, PhD. So just send me a connection request and a message, and I'll be happy to get back to you. And in the meantime, this is Dr. Robin.